welcome everyone, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy afternoon, I'm sure, to attend this information session. As you know, WCAPS, aka Women of Color Advancing Peace, Security, and Conflict Transformation, their vision is to advance the leadership and professional development of women of color in the fields of international peace, security, and conflict transformation. So in advancing our mission, we always want to connect members with opportunities and provide information on different ways that they can get involved in the peace and security space, which includes fellowships and other similar programs. So we are delighted today to have Ms. Devin Ferguson and Mr. Jim Lindsay with us today from the Council on Foreign Relations to share a bit about their fellowship programs. So without further ado, I will hand over the floor to those two and let them introduce themselves, share about the programs, and then hopefully get into a robust and rich question and answer period. So I will hand over the floor to the two of you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Gabby, for that introduction. It is a pleasure to be here. I also want to thank everybody who's joining us for today's CFR Fellowships Information Session. As Gabby said, I am Jim Lindsay. I am the Senior Vice President and Director of the Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations. Besides overseeing the work of the Council's in-house think tank, the David Rockefeller Studies Program, I also oversee the Council's fellowship programs. As Gabby mentioned, I'm joined by my colleague, Devin Ferguson. Devin is Assistant Director for Fellowship Affairs at the Council. In a moment, she's going to outline the specifics of the International Affairs Fellowship programs that are now open and accepting applications. Before we do that, however, I want to give those of you not familiar with the Council a bit of background on who we are. We are an independent, nonpartisanship membership organization, think tank, and publisher dedicated to helping people better understand the world and foreign policy challenges facing the United States and other countries. Our membership is diverse. They live across the United States and abroad. They hail from a range of professions and occupations, including government, academia, finance, industry, philanthropy, the media, and the arts. A major part of our mission is to help develop the next generation of foreign policy leaders and thinkers, a generation that we hope will reflect the diversity of the United States. To that end, the Council sponsors a range of fellowship programs. The ones we're going to be discussing today, the International Affairs Fellowships, or what we like to call IAFs, are aimed at mid-career professionals with a demonstrated commitment to a career in foreign policy who are looking to gain experience in a new environment. That can be someone in academia or the private sector is hoping to gain experience working in a policy-making setting, or it could be someone in government who is looking to spend time in a scholarly setting. And it can be someone who's looking to spend time doing research and writing while living in another country. I'm going to ask Devin now to speak about the various IAF programs. Let me just note that you can find all the details about the Council's fellowship programs on our website, cfr.org. Just go to cfr.org/fellowships. Now, I'd also ask, as you talk to your own networks, that you let them know about these opportunities with the Council, because again, we're trying to build a broad, diverse, and deep pool of applicants for our various fellowship programs. But now over to you, Devin.
Great, thanks, Jim. As Jim mentioned, my name is Devin Ferguson. I'm the Associate Director for Fellowship Affairs at CFR. The first of our programs I'd like to share with you today is, of course, our flagship fellowship, the IAF, or International Affairs Fellowship. This program launched in 1967 with the goal being to provide a transformative experience to the selected fellows, giving them a set of rewarding new insights and perspectives that fellows can either take back to their home institution or to assist them in launching a new career trajectory. Each year, this program awards approximately 10 fellowships. Fellows are placed with a host institution for a period of 12 months and receive a stipend of $120,000. And again, as Jim mentioned, this program is open to mid-career individuals who are US citizens and who have demonstrated a commitment to a career in foreign policy. During the program, fellows work on a wide range of issues from transnational crime in Latin America, US-Korea relations, climate change, and sports diplomacy in Africa, just to name a few of those. And fellows have been placed in academic settings such as CFR, CSIS, Brookings, and Harvard University, as well as in policymaking spaces such as on Capitol Hill, the Departments of Defense and State, and with the United Nations as well. We have an illustrious roster of IAF alumni, including former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, recently confirmed Ambassador to South Africa, Reuben Brigady II, and the Administrator of USAID, Samantha Power. In addition to, of course, our flagship program, we'll also be seeking applicants this summer for a number of other fellowship opportunities, including 3 of our IAF overseas programs. All of our IAF overseas programs are intended for individuals without substantial prior experience in the program countries, and knowledge of the local languages for each program is not required to participate or apply for the fellowship. So the first of our overseas programs is the International Affairs Fellowship in Japan, sponsored by Hitachi Limited. This program, which is just now over 25 years old, brings 3 to 5 fellows to Japan each year to research and work on US-Japan relations topics, hosted by a Japanese institution. And our fellows on this program spend between 3 and 12 months in Japan and receive both a competitive monthly stipend as well as a grant for international travel. Next, we have our newest program launched this year, the IAF in Indonesia, which is sponsored by the Center of International Relations Studies Foundation. And this program will select 1 or 2 fellows to spend between 3 and 12 months at an Indonesian institution to develop and deepen their understanding of relevant foreign policy topics in the region. And this program will provide a $100,000 stipend, prorated for fellowships that are less than a year, as well as a grant for international travel. Beginning this week, we'll also be opening applications for our IAF in Canada, which is sponsored by Power Corporation of Canada. The IAF in Canada will select up to 2 fellows per year who spend either 6 or 12 months hosted by a Canadian institution to deepen their knowledge of Canada. And this program awards a $110,000 stipend for 12 months, again, prorated if it's less than 12 months, as well as a modest travel grant. I wanted to quickly go over some general points about the application and award timeline for that apply to all of our IAF programs, which are open now through October 31st. Application requirements and do vary slightly for each fellowship, so I do encourage you to visit cfr.org/fellowships to read more about the programs, eligibility, and specific application requirements. Generally, the online application, again, for all of our programs consists of 3 main parts: the general information section, as would appear on your CV. Most importantly, your project proposal for the fellowship year, which should describe an area of research or policy that you're interested in examining during the fellowship year, as well as how you would contribute to the breadth of work on that topic. And finally, 3 letters of recommendation. Following the application deadline, again on October 31st, our selection committees will review all our applications and arrange interviews with the most promising candidates. Applicants of our 3 overseas fellowships this year will be notified of their award status by the end of January 2023, and applicants of our flagship IAF will be notified in late March 2023 for the upcoming application cycle. For selected fellows, our fellowship, following the award, our fellowship affairs team here at CFR will work with you to find a suitable host placement for your fellowship year. And once your fellowship begins, our awardees have access to CFR events and roundtables. And each year, our incoming and former fellows are invited back to attend the annual IAF conference. So I hope that one of these fellowships will be of interest to you now or in the future. And with that, I would love to open it up to any questions you might have about the application or the fellowships in general.
All right, thank you so much for that, Devin. I also encourage everyone to not be shy and come forward with their questions. You can either enter them into the chat. I think you're also able to raise your hand, and I'm more than happy to give you the floor to ask your question out loud.
What constitutes a mid-career professional? This is from Christina Ackerman. I am degreed in international affairs, but have been unable to find work in the field in any meaningful capacity. Okay, what classifies as mid-career professional?
A mid-career professional is generally someone probably from late 20s, early 30s to probably mid to late 40s. The application process that Devin referred to, that you can find at cfr.org/leading/fellowships, ask people, as Devin mentioned, to identify both a project they would want to work on or a topic they're interested, and to provide letters of recommendation from 3 people who can provide a holistic assessment of your work and your ability to undertake the work you propose to do. So those are the basic criteria. I should note that for all of our fellowships, decisions about who is awarded are made by a selection committee that meets and reviews all the applications that come in. I should note that these are selection committees that we select, and we ourselves, Deb and I, are not involved in selecting applications.
I see there's another question as well, which is, I am interested in U.S. foreign policy related to gender and women issues in the Middle East. Would that be a relevant topic of focus or to focus on? This particular asker just finished their PhD in gender and women's studies and doesn't have too much of a background in political science. Thank you, Ruth, for the question.
Well, thank you for the question, Ruth. Thank you, Gabby, for reading it out loud, since I don't know how to operate Zoom to actually see the question, but that's because I'm a Luddite. Anyway, what I would say is that, yes, it's a great topic. When you think about American foreign policy, people interested in going into government, obviously, American foreign policy covers everything from what we used to call high politics, use of force, all the way down to issues that we just discussed, like gender, conflict resolution, and the like. So again, it's really sort of open in terms of focus. What the selection committee typically is interested in is what you propose to do with the fellowship. And I think actually, if you wish, you can go on the fellowships page at cfr.org, and you can look for each of the fellowships and see a roster of alums who have worked or have been selected, and get a sense of who has been chosen for this. I will just note that we have had people work on gender issues, people working on trade issues, workforce development issues. Again, what the selection committee is really looking for are really smart, talented people who have a clear sense of what it is they want to work on and stand a reasonable chance of making a significant contribution. And as Devin pointed out, if you go back and look at the roster of alums from CFR's various fellowship programs over the years, these fellowship programs have been a really good incubator and developer of talent. Many of the people you will see on these lists are people who have held or currently do hold high-level positions in the U.S. government or are significant contributors in the field of academia. One thing I do want to stress is that you're not required to be a political scientist to be eligible for any of these fellowships. I happen to be a political scientist by training, but being a political scientist is by no means a requirement for applications. And we have plenty of people who are selected for various awards who are not political scientists.
Oh, I see another one's come through. So from Alexis, she's asking, have former fellows ever focused on criminal justice reform, and how does CFR find organizations to host fellows? What is the criteria for an organization placement?
That's an excellent question. The first part of it, I'm not sure that I can answer because I've only assumed direct oversight of the program earlier this summer. So I can't say that I am familiar with everyone who has been awarded a fellowship. What I would say is that criminal justice, certainly working on criminal justice issues in terms of foreign policy would be a perfectly appropriate topic to work on. And the fact, again, that it's not sort of a course that would be at the core, let's say, of a political scientist's syllabus doesn't mean it doesn't fit with the broad mission of the International Affairs Fellowships, which are really interested in taking a very broad view of international relations, of foreign policy, because again, so much of what we think of as foreign policy goes well beyond simple issues of missiles and bombs and things like that. And again, these are fellowships designed to explore the wide range of topics that are there in foreign policy. Again, if you're at the State Department, there are just lots of issues that the State Department has to grapple with. And we've tried to place people in a wide variety of positions. Now, in terms of how we go about finding host organizations, Devin can talk a little bit more in depth about that, but I would describe it overall as a joint effort. Many of the people who apply for a fellowship have a sense of agencies they would hope to be at. Maybe it's the U.S. Trade Representative's office. Maybe it's the Department of Labor because they want to work on human trafficking issues. Maybe it's at the State Department and the Bureau of Oceanic Affairs because they're interested in fishery issues. And so oftentimes the applicants have a sense of where they would like to go. And they have ideas of several places they would want to go. At the same time, the selection committee, and many members of our selection committee have served in government, have sort of broad training. They may have ideas, indeed may suggest, for example, that this person would actually be better off at this office in the Department of Defense. It's right up their alley. Or maybe what they really should be looking at, given their focus, is to be at the United Nations, whether in New York or at one of the overseas postings. So there's a bit of that goes on. But I don't know, Devin, since you spent a lot of time trying to place people, maybe you want to add some flavor as to how the process works.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. It really is a back and forth between both, our team here at CFR and the fellow, aligning your research interests, with potential host placements. I would highlight what Jim mentioned, in his introductory remarks. It is important to identify a host institution that will provide that transformative experience. So if you're an individual coming from government, we'd be interested in having you focus more in a research space, placed in a research space where you'll have that time away to really focus on a relevant foreign policy research topic. Again, going the other way, if you're an academic, the only, I would say, criteria would be that the host institution would be a government agency someplace on Capitol Hill, an international organization where you'll be able to get that hands-on experience in a new environment. So I would say that's one key element. Another item I'll just note is, again, during the application process, we do ask that fellows come up with a few potential placement options, but by no means are you required to come with any firm set or firm idea of placement, or having, talked to anybody in your host institution before you receive the award. Again, that's something, if selected, that you'll be working on with us here at CFR. And again, we just leverage our great network of academics and experts, as well as Jim mentioned, the selection committees are great resources for identifying those potential placements.
Just one thing I should add here to what Devin has mentioned is that we cannot guarantee anyone placement in any particular agency or office. At the end of the day, who serves as a host institution is solely decided by the host institutions. So we can't guarantee a placement. The other thing I would just also mention in terms of doing this is that some fellows may be placed at more than one institution. They might split up their time on their fellowship. So for example, somebody might spend for the traditional international affairs fellowship, someone coming out of academia or the private sector, let's say 6 months in a US agency, maybe the State Department, maybe the Department of Justice, maybe USTR, and then spend 6 months on Capitol Hill, maybe working in the Senate on a committee, in the House working for a member. Again, there's a lot of different ways this can be packaged. And partly it's a function of what people are interested in, what their networks are, and also who's interested in serving as host.
Wonderful. Until some more questions come through the Q&A, I put 2 questions into the chat. So the first one for me, which I think our members might like to hear, is in your opinion, what are your top 3 tips in terms of positioning yourself or oneself for one of these fellowships, and especially in the proposal, I guess, element of the application? What do reviewers like to see?
Okay. That's a great question, Gabby. Let me list, I guess, what I would see as the top 3 things, and then Devin can perhaps suggest that maybe I don't have the right top 3. Well, I would suggest first off, if you want a clean application, it's always a case that with any of these applications, people want to see something that is not full of errors, people's names are spelled correctly, in the rest, because the assumption is that this is important to you, so it's going to reflect a lot of care. And if it's messy, a lot of typos in the rest, they're going to say to themselves, if this is how you operate with something that's important to you, how can we be sure you're going to bring a level of excellence to your host organization? So that's one. Second thing is, I believe the selection committees put a lot of emphasis on the quality of the proposal. They're really interested in the idea. They want to know what you intend to do, why it's important. We'll call it the so what question. And then they want to get a sense of why doing this work is going to be transformative for you. Because again, the way the fellowship is designed is it's really trying to give people an opportunity to make a leap, to try something different, to be in a different setting. So it becomes very important, I think, in a proposal to be able to answer that question. Third thing I would flag is the selection committee puts a fair amount of weight on the letters of recommendation people get. The references matter. And I think in that sense, what we want to do is to make sure that the combination of letters that you supply give a full picture of your abilities and your skills. And again, many people who apply for these fellowships have done several different things in their career. And so you want to make sure that those letters of reference actually speak to those various experiences on your resume, in your career, and can relate to how that matters for the proposal or the work you're seeking to do. I don't know, Devin, if you have some other things you want to flag.
Yeah, I would just second the emphasis on the proposal and the research question. And in that vein, I would have, in addition to rooting out any errors in the application itself and the proposal itself, having other individuals read your proposal to make sure, again, that it's neat, that it's organized, that it makes sense. And again, one last thing, just that the selection committee looks for in the proposals is, making sure that your research topic does align and demonstrates that you've thought, or demonstrates that you've thought critically, again, about where you would undertake this work that you're proposing, where, which offices and institutions would benefit from your expertise, from, finding the solutions or having a discussion on the topics that you're interested in discussing during the fellowship.
Gabby, do you want me to answer the second question now?
Sure. So just so everybody can kind of get a sense of what the question is, I was curious to know if there was an aspect of mentorship or networking that is encouraged in the program, and if in fact you need to already be very well connected in order to be a competitive applicant for this fellowship.
Yes, there is an element of mentoring and networking in this fellowship. No, you don't have to be incredibly well networked before you apply for the fellowship. The fellowship has taken plenty of people over the years who you might describe as sort of being outside some major network, but they were talented people who brought a lot to the conversation. They were recognized by selection committees for their abilities. And so I wouldn't want to have anyone come away from this conversation thinking that this is a fellowship for people who already have their foot in the door and are, way up the ladder of achievement. I mean, this is something that really looks at holistically at the people who are applying. What is it they're proposing to do? Is the committee convinced that this is important work to be done, that the person in question has the right skills and ability to be able to execute on the work that they are proposing? Again, I would also say, just in terms of the networking aspect of it, for people who are awarded these fellowships, whether you're someone from academia going to government, private sector going into government, or someone in government coming out to work in a think tank, obviously, when you go to your host organization, you're going to have plenty of opportunities to network, to meet people, and to develop better understanding of maybe the work you're doing as well as the institution that you're at. And again, I say that I was an International Affairs Fellow, selected way back in the day, and it was life-changing, transformational experience for me. It introduced me to networks that I was not a part of and only read about in the newspaper. The other thing is, again, at the council, because the fellowships are part of our broader mission of trying to develop the next generation of foreign policy leaders, we spend a fair amount of time trying to create opportunities for international affairs fellows to sort of plug into the council's network and meet its members. So we hold events for IAFs who are based in Washington, New York, where they get to attend with other CFR members. In the case of fellowships that are overseas, like the International Affairs Fellowship in Japan, sponsored by the Hitachi Corporation, we have meetings at the end of those fellowships where people get to present their work with CFR members. So we do a lot of that to try to basically connect people. And again, it's a little bit of our trying to connect people, and people who are awarded these fellowships tend to be people who like to network or learn to network. So it's a combination of both. But Devin can tell you a bit more about some of the specifics of the things that we do to make sure that our international affairs fellows really do have a transformational experience.
Yeah, so I'll just second what Jim said, and he flagged a couple of events that, again, are central to the IAF experience, which, again, for our Japan program members, they have a separate opportunity to present. And as I mentioned, we also have the IAF conference. But in addition to those, during the fellowship year, you have access to CFR events, which now, thanks to our technology and digital age, that includes virtual events for those that aren't based in DC or in New York. We also have a very active, our IAFs, I would say, are very active, both the current fellows and alumni. Most of them are happy to speak with incoming fellows and stay connected long after the program. I would say we introduce all the fellows to the other individuals in your cohort for the fellowship year. So you'll have that opportunity to meet and to share your experiences internally with other fellows of your same class year. So that's another opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And just kind of to piggyback a little bit off of what you were saying, Jim, in terms of potentially folks might be jumping from the private sector into government, or, vice versa. Is the fellowship program, I guess, open and welcoming to those who may be thinking of a transition into a new area, especially, specifically, or folks who might want to explore a different focus area, maybe within, policy work, etc. Is the program kind of welcoming to individuals kind of in that lane?
Oh, certainly, Gabby. I mean, I think there's a long track record of individuals who become international affairs fellows, and that decision really changes the course of their life. I mean, the sort of example that we would probably offer up, because it's the most well-known, would be Condoleezza Rice. I mean, Secretary Rice's first job in government was as International Affairs Fellow. She worked in the Department of Defense. That sort of opened up a career path for her. And as you know, she went on to become National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. And that has been replicated many times over by people who get these fellowships, and it again provides a transformational experience for them. So Devin may want to run through more examples. I could spend the rest of the afternoon giving you examples of people who were doing one thing, got an IAF, and ended up doing something else for the rest of their lives. So we tend to view that as a victory. I mean, this is what we're about. We're trying to take really talented people and give them opportunities to try something new, because we believe that the foreign policy community in the United States needs to be enriched by new blood. It needs to have people who come into it maybe from a different perspective, didn't start out there. Likewise, we want to take people who've been in foreign policy and get them out and give them a chance to think about what they have done, and also to share their lessons with others. That's why the IAF is not just about putting individuals from academia or the private sector in government. It's also taking people in government and giving them a chance to come out of government, and I guess we would call it decompress, but to spend some time reflecting on what they've learned and maybe do a deeper dive into issues that they're concerned about, so they can go back with a sort of deeper intellectual well in terms of the work they do in government.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I have another question, and folks, don't be shy. This is your opportunity to ask questions. WCAPS is really an organization that encourages you to speak up and seek out different opportunities and learn as much as possible. So there's no such thing as a silly question. So just wanted to put that out there in case anyone's sitting on a question that they may be afraid to ask. We are here for you and here to answer any questions. But just another question that I was kind of thinking about, which was more for folks that are thinking about maybe being a fellow in the future. And they're like, okay, well, maybe I want to rack up some more experience, right? Do you have any tips on what type of opportunities those folks should be seeking out in order to make them more competitive later? Is volunteerism valued? What sorts of activities should potential candidates be kind of filling their resumes and their purviews with as they, decide on when to apply for this fellowship?
That is a great question, Gabby, that defies a simple answer. And I say that for the following reason. Selection committees for the council approach people's applications holistically. So I don't want to suggest that there's some simple formula that if added together maximizes your chances of being a fellow. We have people coming from very different backgrounds, people coming from very different communities for our fellowship. So I don't want to somehow suggest that there's just one route to a fellowship. What I would suggest is that, and this again goes back to my advice on how to have a strong application, is one, you give considerable thought to what it is you would want to work on. And number two, for that interest to be reflected in what you have done thus far. I think it is probably less appealing for a selection committee looking at a candidate who has spent, let's say, all of their time working on gender and peace studies and now wants to come in and do negotiations over Ukraine. If you can't sort of connect your experiences to what it is that you want to do, I think that weakens your case. So again, what I would suggest is just to think about going forward, what would you want to work on and what body of work shows that you actually have developed some expertise that could benefit from your getting or being awarded an International Affairs Fellowship. Second thing I would say, and again, this goes back to the application, letters of reference matter. And so I would think you want to have experiences where you work with people and have exposure to people who can write and give you strong letters of recommendation, who get to know you as an individual and can suggest not only do you have the skills necessary to succeed as an IAF, but that this would be transformative to you, that it sort of fits in the whole of your career trajectory, even if it means jumping from one sort of industry, let's say, private sector or the academy, into government or vice versa. I think that really becomes critical. You really want to be able to demonstrate that you have a deep interest in the work you're proposing to do, that you have the skills necessary to do something with that, whatever host organization you're going to. And then finally, that doing this will be transformational for you. And again, I just probably want to close by saying, while it's perfectly fine to have some idea of where you might want to spend your fellowship, it is also okay to be open to getting feedback from us or from selection committee members about where you might want to go. I don't want anyone not to apply because they aren't sure which particular office in the Defense Department or in the Department of Justice or the Department of State would be the best one for them to be at. Again, we're trying to bring people who haven't had these experiences into the process and not shut somebody out because they don't have a sort of firsthand knowledge of the org chart in the State Department, and so they can select the exact office in any particular bureau. So again, this is for people who haven't already done government or people in government who already haven't spent time in the academy. It's supposed to provide people with a different experience. I know Devin wants to add something to that.
No, Jim, I think that just about covers it. I think we have another question in the chat. Okay, if you have applied and were denied, is there an opportunity to utilize previous recommendations for a second cycle?
Yes.
Okay, the recommendations I had were very senior individuals and likely won't have time to write again. Okay.
Yes, I mean, the same people can write for you. There's no disqualification. And I should even step back. It is possible if people have applied in the past and weren't successful to reapply in the future. I do believe one of the questions we have asks if people have applied in the past. But I will just note that the fact that you were unsuccessful last year doesn't mean that you're immediately disqualified this year. Again, the selection committee and the members of the selection committees take these processes very, very seriously. They spend an awful lot of time going through applications. We're deeply indebted to people for being willing to commit a fair amount of time in doing this. And again, they're always sort of starting from zero with each application year, trying to figure out what are the best set of applications going forward and that merit an award.
Right. Jim, and I'll just add, speaking a little bit more specifically to the application itself, the application does not save letters of recommendation from a previous application, so they would need to be resubmitted and re-requested through those individuals. So they can upload them to the portal. But one thing I would just add is it really is important for the committee to see letters from individuals who know you well and can speak to your specific proposal. So of course, if you've made any changes to the project or the research topic that you're proposing that year, it would be a good idea to make sure that those individuals have, can provide feedback on the specifics of your proposal. And again, if this was some years ago, to, your specific expertise and qualifications that would make you uniquely suited to addressing that question wherever your host institution may be.
Yeah, that was a great question. And I know sometimes for other, fellowships and programs, folks end up, applying over, if they don't get it the first time, they'll apply again. So thanks for that question. I also wondered, as we wait for more questions to roll in, keep them coming, folks. And I'll drop this in the chat. I was curious about language skills. So for example, for the program in Japan, would the applicant need to have some sort of fluency in Japanese beforehand? Is language immersion and training a part of the program or the fellowship program itself? So just wanted to know about that, because I think that could potentially impact if people apply or not, if they feel like they need to know the language.
Devin, you want to answer that?
Yeah, happy to. For all of our overseas programs, there are no language requirements to apply or receive the award for the fellowship. I would say depending, a lot of our partner host institutions are completely conducted in English. The institutions you would be working with, there would likely be English counterparts that you would be working with. In terms of language immersion upon arrival, if that's something you're interested in, we completely encourage you to reach out and to find those opportunities. But again, knowledge of the language for each of the programs is not required.
Yeah, and if I could just add to what Devin just said, Gabby, I think it's important for us to stress that the country IAFs, Indonesia, Japan, Canada, are not designed for people who are experts on those countries. So, for example, if you were a professor of anthropology and you've done years of field work in Indonesia, the IAF in Indonesia is not meant for you. It's meant for people who haven't had a great deal of exposure to the country in question. Second thing to stress is, again, with the overseas IAF, some of them are for shorter than a year. So people may only go for 3 or 4 months, in which case language immersion probably isn't practical, just given the relatively short length of the fellowship. And I will say that talking to people who've been alums of the various IAFs in countries, Japan and Canada, and hopefully in Indonesia, what they've discovered is that they're able to do a lot of work, even though they may not speak the local language, because so much of the business is conducted in English, and there's a lot of care given to finding people, finding host organizations that can work with somebody who isn't a fluent speaker of the local language.
Wonderful, thank you. Anyone else have any burning questions? And I'm sure, there'll be opportunities to also follow up and maybe ask questions after this session and after today. Of course, as you all know, this session is being recorded, so we will share out with the rest of the membership, and perhaps other questions will emerge from that as well. But just want to leave a little bit of space for any other questions from our participants.
Well, while we're waiting to see if we have any final questions, Gabby, perhaps Devin could let everybody know if they have follow-up questions, where they can send those follow-up questions to. And before she does that, I would simply ask people that if the fellowship isn't something that you're interested in, or even if it is, we would greatly appreciate it if you shared news of the fellowship with members of your networks. One of the things, again, we're striving to do is to let people know about these opportunities. Obviously, people can't take advantage of opportunities if they're not aware that they exist. So we'd appreciate any help you can give us in letting people know that there are these opportunities that could be transformational for people. But Devin, if people want to follow up with us, how could they go about doing that?
Yes, please go ahead and email any questions either about the fellowship's eligibility or the application itself. Again, all our IAFs are open right now through October 31st to our fellowships email, fellowships@cfr.org. And again, if you know of anyone who might be interested or might be a good fit for the fellowship, please feel free to have them reach out. We're happy to connect.
Sounds great. It would be wonderful if you could drop that email in the chat.
Yeah.
Additionally, do you have any social?
I'm gonna let Devin do that because I will probably not get it done properly. So
awesome. And also, if there's any, folks like social media too, and if you have any like LinkedIn page or anything that would be cool to follow with any updates, or if there's any other information sessions or kind of networking sessions. I'm not sure if you do anything with like past fellows or anything like that where folks might like to mingle. That would be very helpful too. Great. Let me see.
well, Gabby, I want to thank you for hosting us and giving us this opportunity to talk about the council's fellowship programs. I want to thank everyone who joined us on this call to learn about them. And I guess I'll also thank the people who aren't on this call now, but will see us since we're being preserved digitally for perpetuity. Again, if you have any questions, please reach out and let us know what they are. We're happy to answer them. And we look forward to getting some applications.
Thank you so much again for taking the time out to join us, participants and panelists. We are very grateful and look forward to having hopefully a gang of WCAPS members applying for these fellowships, and definitely sharing them with their networks. And we will catch up with you next time.
Thank you very much, Gabby. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much. You
Thank
too.
you.